All right. Welcome to the Tuesday night Principled Chiro broadcast from DE and Band of Brothers. There it is, Kat. Thanks for that. I'm Dr. Brian Moriarty, your esteemed MC for tonight's exciting call with Dr. Gregg Rubinstein. But before we hear from Greg, let's talk about DE, guys. We are 10 weeks away from Dynamic Essentials in Atlanta. Let's get that graphic up there. Boom, Atlanta, August 12th to the 15th, followed closely by Atlanta in October, and then the back-to-back Sarasota, January, April, double whammy DE back-to-back thingy. That is going to be freaking awesome. But it all starts, guys, in Atlanta, August 12th to the 15th. And I put a post up on the DE page and kind of seeing who was coming. And we got people like Jeff Arnell coming back to DE, baby. This is going to be a good one, guys. I hope you all are there. COVID stuff is going away. No more travel restrictions, quarantines. It's just time to show up. We had a record-breaking attendance in Clearwater for the spring DE. Now it's time to show up and even bigger and break that record. So 10 weeks out, guys. Time to sign up, get your flights, get your hotels, register for the conference. Bring your staff, bring your CEAs, bring your associates. It's going to be friggin' awesome. So I hope to see you there. For more info, go to lifede.com, and we'll see you in Atlanta, August 12th to the 15th. But for tonight, I've known Dr. Gregg Rubinstein for a number of years in his role as the vice president of the New York Chiropractic Council. Greg was nice enough to have me up to speak at one of his philosophy nights a few years ago, actually just before COVID. And I can tell you that Dr. Gregg Rubinstein is truly a class act. He is on the front lines there in New York City. Nothing but principle. No wavering in this guy. He is an absolute warrior for chiropractic. But I'll tell you this. We hadn't seen Greg at DE, because of COVID and things like that and quarantining. And we saw Greg at the last DE. And I was privy to see him the first night on that Thursday when he came in. I think he had a CA with him. And Greg looked kind of burnt out. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. Greg looked like he had been through a war up there, and he truly had, because where his office is, that was like really close to ground zero at COVID, and tens of thousands of people dying, and everything closed and locked down for a long period of time. And Greg looked kind of worn out and frustrated, I'll be honest. But as the weekend started to transpire, I saw a different Gregg Rubinstein open up. And I don't know if, how important this DE was to him. Maybe he'll mention this in his talk, but I would think this had to be one of his most important DEs to be at, because he truly transformed in that weekend from a guy who had been through the worst of the worst with COVID to a guy who now at the Parade of Stars was just opening up and full of life, and told us this amazing story about how when his office was shut down and everything was shut down and nurses on the front line were fighting COVID, this guy just stepped up and just started serving. He was adjusting people in parking lots and wherever the hell he could, take care of the frontline healthcare workers. This guy stepped up and served. Yeah, that's one of the things we learned at DE is serve for the sake of serving. Wasn't charging anything, just here. Let me just serve the people. And it was friggin' amazing to hear him at Parade of Stars. And by the end of the weekend, man, that smile was from ear to ear for this guy. And it's truly my honor to introduce tonight's speaker for our Tuesday night Principal Chiropractic Call from New York, New York. Give it up for Dr. Gregg Rubinstein.
Oh, look at that. I'm live. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm hoping so. So I'm just going to jump right into it and get started. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. It really is an honor to be asked to do this call. A lot of you probably know me, and I'm sure some of you don't. I'm usually pretty quiet. I like to be kind of the guy in the back of the room, but that's certainly been changing quite a bit, thanks to DE and a lot of other good things that have come into my life. As he said, Brian, in my introduction, I live on a beautiful island. It's about 13 miles long and 2 miles wide. It's called Manhattan. And I've been here for just about 30 years. As a matter of fact, this December will mark my 30th year in practice. So I'm very excited for that milestone to come through. And I want to start off, I guess, like most people start off, and I want to share my chiropractic story because it's really apropos for the times and the things that I've been getting through. My chiropractic story goes back to when I was a 17-year-old kid. I was in high school standing around a keg alongside of a pool at a high school graduation party. And the talk of that summer back in 1984 was there was one of those measles outbreaks. And everyone was talking about how, you weren't going to get into college unless you could prove you were vaccinated against measles or German measles or whichever one was going around then. And I remember being a little bit concerned about that because when I was a kid, my pediatrician's office closed and moved away, and we had no contact and we had no proof. And my mom was really stressing about it and all. So people were talking about it. So they were talking about vaccines way back then in 1984. And what was interesting is that I'm standing at this keg party, pumping a beer, and this girl says something how she'd never been vaccinated. She never took an aspirin or an antibiotic or anything. And, she's going to school and she's fine. And, I kind of looked at her kind of weird because I'd never really heard that kind of thinking before. And I'm like, how can that be? They don't let you into grade school if you don't have vaccines. And what she said changed my life. She said that my dad's a chiropractor. He adjusts my spine so my nerve system works better and I don't get sick. And I looked at her again like she had three heads. And of course, what I did was, go home and ask mom because it was 1984. We didn't have the internet. I'm like, Mom, what does a chiropractor do? And she's like, I don't really know. I think they do something with your back. And that was really the end of the conversation. And I kind of filed that conversation away. And lucky for me, when I went up to the State University at Albany in 1984, just a couple months later, I was walking on the campus and I saw this sign and it said pre-chiropractic club. And I was like, wow, there's that word, chiropractic again. Let me go check that out. So I go to this lecture and there was this doctor, I think his name was Barilli, and he just basically did his healthcare class or his lay lecture. And I sat there and every word he said just went right into my soul until the light bulb above my head went boop. And it went on, and I knew right then and there that I wanted to be a chiropractor. So I started to manifest that, going to those meetings, telling my parents that I was going to be a chiropractor. And they tried to tell me, oh, why don't you think about it? Maybe you could be a real doctor, or maybe a podiatrist or a dentist like your brother, and all that kind of stuff. So the cards were somewhat stacked against me, but that stayed with me. And it was just very powerful hearing that lecture. Again, going back to, you never know how far reaching something you think, say, or do today will affect the lives of millions tomorrow. Well, Jill Pavia, I know you're not listening, but I want to give you a shout out and to your father, Dr. Pavia, who was a principal Palmer graduate who, shared that idea. He told you the story. You told me the story. And now I'm lucky enough to share that story with about 200 people every week, sometimes more, sometimes less. All depends on what's going on here in my heart and my head. But the path that I took wasn't always a straight line, even though my whole introduction to chiropractic was purely about the principles of chiropractic. The path I took wasn't always straight. My motives and mission from the beginning were perfectly pure. And all I really knew in the beginning was that drugs and vaccines and antibiotics were not needed if your spine was clear. And how I got lost, I'll tell you. And it's just like if anyone's seen Judson talk, when he talks about his brother Ronnie and how he got so mad that no one told him, no one told his family that there was another option. And when I was at NYCC, no one really stood up for the principal at New York Chiropractic College. We had one class on philosophy, which was absolutely an awesome class. Dr. Frank DiGiacomo wrote a book. And he just talked about the book, and it was 100% principle. And I was really excited at that class. It was, matter of fact, the only class I think I ever got an A in ever since. And then that was the end of the principles until I was lucky enough to kind of see Reggie off campus. But everything at school was back pain and neck pain and disc this and diagnose this. And you got to learn how to diagnose this, and you got to learn this, and you got to learn to when to refer. And, I got out of school, I took a job, and because principal wasn't really big at the school, I took a job in an office that really wasn't too principled. We were doing sports and dance related injuries. It was the primary thing. We were right in the theater district, and that's really, what we saw. And so I was kind of working along those lines and tucked away the principles kind of underneath my hat. I did talk about them a little bit, but not to the extent that I wanted to. I started to do healthcare talks, but no one ever came out to them. The doctor that I was working for didn't promote them for me, but a few people would come in and I would turn them on, and they would get some of the principle. But I wasn't really a fully principled chiropractor because I wasn't espousing everything to my patients, and it wasn't the reason that they were coming in. And, when I started to attend DE and started to get more involved with the principal, I really have one person to thank there, and that was Dr. Seth Chalfin. I hope he's on the line. It would be great that he is, to give him a shout out, because he really helped me kind of get on the right track. And I remember one day in clinic, I was looking at some over-penetrated piece of garbage that I called the cervical x-ray. And I remember just staring at it, and he came by, saw me just sitting there, and he said, "Hey, would you like some help with that?" And he started over with the ABCs and told me how I screwed up my technique and how I overpenetrated the film and what factors I needed to change. And he was just a nice guy who was in love with chiropractic and the principle. And it turned out he was the one who got me to join the New York Chiropractic Council, which then eventually led me to DE. Now, I've only been coming down to DE for about 13 or 14 years, and it's been life-changing for me. I've matured a lot, and I've learned a ton from attending DE. And what you see before you now and all the accolades that I get is only because I've been standing on the shoulders of giants and sharing in their wisdom. And when people come up to me at DE now and ask me questions or ask me how to do something, I always feel flattered, but I also feel a little bit awkward when people ask me for advice, because everything that I say and do, I learned right there from that stage. I never really had an original thought about chiropractic. It's really all just the stuff I heard from the DE stage, from Sid, from Reggie, from Sigafus, and from damn near every person who ever graced that DE stage. And the first thing that I really learned about DE was about service. And it coincided with the start of my service to the profession. I've been on the board of the New York Chiropractic Council, serving for about 15 years. Currently, I'm serving as the vice president. Don't know if I'll make it to the presidency. I certainly don't have the temperament in my mind, but we'll see how that goes. But what's interesting about the New York Chiropractic Council, it really is an organization that was spawned by DE. DE was going on. A bunch of NYCC chiropractic students went down there, and they came back here and they saw the need to start a more principled organization, because the one organization we had was not fighting for the principle. And certainly the New York Chiropractic Council, now we have our flaws, but when I was asked to serve, I just said, I will. And anyone who served on any chiropractic board or state organization knows that it eats a lot of time, and it's pretty much a thankless job. However, my mindset was really coming from DE, and my thought process was, if not me, then who is going to step up? Who's going to step up and defend our principles? Who's going to make sure that the next chiropractor that comes out of school doesn't have to wait 10 or 15 years before they learn about a principled organization or find a place that they can get principle from? What gives me or any other chiropractor the right to sit back and be that armchair quarterback and complain that, oh, it's not being done right? And that really burns my bottom, because there's lots of people out there who are out there saying, oh, you guys aren't doing it right, or you need to do it this way. And the thing I always tell them is just step up and serve. There's plenty of room. There are positions on boards out there in every state, and everyone should be serving. And as a matter of fact, I don't think you really have a right to practice chiropractic in your state if you're at least not a member of one of the state organizations. And I don't care which one, but you need to be a member of a state organization and serve the profession, because you can't just serve your patients. You can't just serve yourself. You got to serve the profession and give something back. And all those guys on that DE stage, they're doing it. And we need to be doing the same and stepping up our game so chiropractic and the principle goes on and on and on. And one of the things that Brian introduced me as, and saying that how I'm like really getting my together and I'm a rock star and stuff like that. But really the thing that I learned the most at the last DE, and the thing that made me smile more, I think what he was referring to, is that I learned how to experience joy for other people. I can always remember when I first started coming to DE, and there were people on that stage, killing it, seeing, 100 more people a week than I am. And I'm like, well, that guy's younger than I am. He hasn't been in practice as long as I was. And I have to admit, back then, I felt envy. I was envious. But recently, and especially at this last DE, I just felt that shift. And I felt it in my heart and my mind. And I felt my whole body just let go. And now I'm able to see and feel joy for other people and their successes. I want people to success. That's why I share with people and try to lift people up. And DE changes things, and it changes people. And it seems to happen always for the better. And just like chiropractic, they say chiropractic always works. You might not see it right away. It could take days, weeks, months, years. You never know, but it always works. And I'm a living testament to that. Now, I can say for sure, but I'm pretty sure that the only reason that my practice still exists today is because I've been going to DE, and I've had people behind me pushing me forward, lifting me up, and anchoring me to the principles and to the dynamic essential. Now, the principles in chiropractic, I knew them pretty well. I'd read them a bunch. I heard Reggie break them down. I've heard other people break them down, and they're extremely powerful and poignant and loaded with truth. But they have so much more meaning when they are coupled with the dynamic essential. It becomes magnified. It's synergistic. They come together synergistically to become greater than the sum of the parts. And it's just like the union of intelligence, matter, and force. This thing we call life. It's simply the union of intelligence, matter, and driven by force. And when intelligence, matter, and force come together, it's nothing short of miraculous, and it is way bigger than just the sum of its parts. And I said it before, I've always had these principles of chiropractic in my heart, but sometimes I still wasn't fully acting as a principled chiropractor. And I needed people to show that to me. And the first time I showed up at DE, I thought I knew the principles well. I was like, oh, this is going to be a cakewalk. I'm really going to love it down here and everything's going to make sense. But really, when I was in DE and I was sitting there listening, and I listened specifically to Dr. Brian Lieberman, he was up on stage and he was going off on how people shouldn't be mixing and shouldn't sully chiropractic. And I literally felt like he was talking directly to me. And I felt so uncomfortable sitting in that room. And I was so embarrassed that my intentions weren't pure, because I was mixing, and I was mixing for the worst reason of all. Because I didn't think that putting a hot pack on someone or putting electric stim on someone helped them get better. And I knew that in my heart of hearts, because when I went to a chiropractor and to get adjusted, I just laid down on the table and got adjusted. I didn't ask for therapy. I didn't want heat put on me. I didn't want electrical stim. I didn't think any of my patients had any problems or had ill health because there was deficiency of electrical current being passed through their body. I was doing it for one reason, and one reason only. I had the realization right then and there that I was serving myself, and I was doing it for the money, because I needed to pay back my loans, because I had such a high rent here in New York City. And I went on with every excuse that I had. But the reality is, it woke me up. I felt like he was talking directly to me, and I went home with this burning in my heart. And the second I opened the office on Monday, I boxed up every electric stim unit that I had, and I had 4 of them, and I drained every hydroculator, and I put them in boxes, and I brought them to a chiropractor upstairs from my office, and I gave it to him, and I said, no matter what I do or say, don't give these things back to me in the next 6 months. And I remember riding the elevator down just a couple of floors to get back to my office, and I was so nervous. I'm like, what am I going to say to the patients? They're all going to ask. And in reality, what was so weird, only 4 or 5 patients asked what happened to the stim. And when they asked me, I actually just broke down and I told them the truth. I told them I was on that, honestly, I didn't think that they had a deficiency of heat or electrical current being passed through their body. And that when I go to a chiropractor, I never have those things done. All I do is get the adjustment. And that's what actually helps the body heal and enhances nerve system function. And that's what gets the body back on track. And it was a very pivotal moment for me in my life, because from there, I was just freed up to do more adjusting, more communication of the principles, and it opened up my heart, and I was just able to love on people even better. And it just felt so good to come clean and tell people, hey, I was doing it for the wrong reasons. I was essentially an insurance whore. But once I gave it up, it felt great. And it really started me on the path where I started towards abundance. And it didn't take long for my numbers to come back. You know, it was like, yeah, there was a piece of the income missing, because every time I did a visit, there was probably another $40 or $50 that was coming in when I was billing those therapies. But when I gave them up, it just gave me more people in there. And I learned to give from my abundance without any expectation of return, and coupled that with the universal principle of the size of the door that you give through is the size of the door that you receive through. And that I learned at DE, and I saw that demonstrated time and time again with the New York Chiropractic Council, which again was spawned from DE. New York City was a hotbed of DE principled chiropractors, especially in the 80s. And after 9/11, all those DE principled doctors went down to the Javits Center, went down to the pile, and we just started working on relief workers. We didn't charge anything. We brought tables. We just went down and served for the sake of serving. And we went to the Javits Center, and it built and built from there. And after Sandy came and ripped through and messed up New York City again, we went out to the Rockaways. We set up in the medical tent right next side to the medical doctors and adjusted anyone who wanted to get adjusted. And then what Brian was talking about, when COVID hit, all of a sudden I went from an office seeing 60 to 70 people a day to seeing one or two. And I just sat in my office, stared at my computer, freaked out about what I was going to do, looked out in the empty streets of New York City where you couldn't see anyone. The streets were completely empty. And it was just a scary place. And everything that I knew and loved was just shaken and gone. And I didn't know if my practice was going to come back. I didn't actually believe that it was really going to happen. You know, there were so many times before where we had all these different diseases that were supposed to come and get us. We had the Zika virus, we had the Ebola virus, we had swine flu, we had avian flu, and all these different things that were supposed to come and get us, but they never hit. And I was just like, oh, it's just another bunch of people running around yelling that the sky is falling. But it wasn't. It was definitely different this time. And the thing that really changed my life and was a stroke of luck, during that time, I got a phone call from a nurse, and he said, you know, we're here as relief workers and we're staying in a hotel not too far from your office, and we need a chiropractor. And immediately my first thought was, no problem. I have an extra table. I'm going to bring it over to the hotel, tell everyone to be there at 8 o'clock, because they were working shifts that went from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. They were working 21 days straight without a day off, and they needed help. They were getting burnt out. These were the frontline workers, and they were the ones who were watching everyone pass away from this unknown entity. They were the ones who were administering and putting people on ventilators that never made it out the other side, and they were stressed. And it was crazy. But I just did what I was taught to do, what I learned at DE, and I set up a table and I put a box up asking for donations to the New York Chiropractic Council if they wanted to make them, because the council was, you know, in dire straits. All of our live events went away, and so people weren't paying dues. And I just put up a box and people made donations. And it was incredible because I was giving for the sake of giving, and money was coming into the council. It wasn't about me. Well, after about a week of adjusting, the hotel asked me politely to take my table and leave. And I asked them why, and they said it was some type of liability and the management didn't want me there. And it was really a bunch of crap, because I had my own professional liability insurance, I had my own office liability, and I added that address as a new location. And every single person that was staying at the hotel was a registered guest. So I asked them, where's the liability? Let me know where the liability gap is, and I'll fill it. Well, they didn't go for it, but the nurses still wanted care. So I invited them to come into the office. But once they were coming into the office using my office, my equipment, and scaring my patients, frankly, because when the patients found out that they were all frontline workers, people did not want to come into the office. They were afraid. But the frontliners, they weren't afraid. The essential workers, they weren't afraid. So it was me the nurses, the garbage men, the train operators, the food service workers, all the essential workers. They were the ones who came out, and they started coming in. But since they came to the office, I charged a nominal fee. I told them I wasn't going to deal with insurance because I didn't have any staff. All my staff left. I said, how about $30 in adjustment, cash or Venmo, and they came. My walls were exploding. I was seeing 30 patients a day, but going from 60 to 70 a day to one or two to see 30 made me ecstatic. I would see about 15 in the evening and 15 in the morning. But again, I never saw it coming. I was so surprised at how few people were coming out and how strictly people were adhering to this quarantine and not going out of their house. There was no one on the street. But it was different here, and I could see that even upstate people were making me angry, saying that, oh, we shouldn't have to quarantine or wear masks. It's a downstate problem. It's a New York City problem. And it made me angry that people were trying to separate from it. But, I was frightened, and I was just as nervous and scared as everyone else because I didn't really know what we were dealing with and if it was ever going to come back. And I really questioned myself at that point too, because I heard someone say that if you educated your patients properly and you were principally based, that regardless of what was going on, they should be coming in for the principle, because if getting adjusted made your nerve system stronger and made your immune system stronger, they should be coming in. It made me very insecure and upset, and really made me start to check what I was saying, and was I communicating the chiropractic message strong enough, or was I letting my community down? Because the outside in stinking thinking made me say, oh, it's the virus, and people are afraid to come in and they're afraid to go out. It's not me. But was I being too light with my chiropractic principles? Was I not confronting people and telling them what they needed to hear out of my own fear? And it just made me think, and it made me slip and check. And I really checked myself, and I was telling the chiropractic story to these nurses, and I made sure that I told them. And it's cool because they have education in anatomy and physiology. They understand the neurology. When I told them our chiropractic principles and our practice principles, they got excited, and they were like, wow, I never really thought of the neurology like that. It runs and regulates my heart, my kidney and spleen, and it controls my immune system. Yeah, I want to get adjusted. And they started telling everyone. They were posting amazing things about me on Facebook, and they just kept coming. For months, my office was filled with these out-of-town visiting nurses, and they were here to serve our community, and I was here to serve them, to give, love, and serve out of my abundance, which was coming back. And it wasn't very abundant at the time, but those nurses kept me in the game. They kept me focused, and they kept coming into my office because they needed my help, and I knew that I was there to serve them. It gave me purpose. It gave me enough crumbs to get my office in survival mode, and with the help of some PPP loans, I was able to pay my rent and pay my staff a mild salary, and then things really started to open up. And I truly believe it was the dynamic essential and the size of the door that I was giving through that made this stuff come back to me. Because there were little more than a dozen practices that I know of that closed, but we didn't. And it was really funny because there were people, well, not really funny at all, but there were people from the other state organization when we were announcing that the governor declared us essential workers and that we should be going in and serving our patients, and that the number 3 reason that people go to hospitals is because of musculoskeletal conditions, and the hospitals are too crowded and we needed to stay open. And this one doctor called the doctors of the council greedy virus vectors, told him that we should be closed and not risking spreading the virus. And I'll never forget that, because it made me so angry and hurt, because we were doing things for the right reason, right? And I wanted to just get on Facebook and eviscerate this guy and start to spar with him. But I learned a lesson a while back, that not to spar on Facebook, because I once sparred with Matt McCoy and got a proper ass whooping. So I don't do that anymore. But it really bothered me because he was just grouping a whole group of chiropractors, just blanketing with them with this negative statement, when the majority of the people were in it for love and making sure that their practice survived and that they could survive and serve the people that they were destined to serve. Because we're servants. We didn't do it from greed. We did it to remain in service to our practice members. And it's that strength in your heart, your passion for what you do, and a desire to serve others that will get you through that adversity. Our life principles coupled with that dynamic essential gives you certainty. And that certainty is what I saw in Brian Lieberman, which changed my life forever. It's the same certainty that I saw in the preacher next door who came into my office looking for help. And when I looked in his eyes and he talked about Jesus and he talked about God, I knew that he knew that he knew. I could see it in his eyes. There was no doubt whatsoever in his eyes, in his voice. He never wavered. When he talked about God, I looked into it and I knew that he knew that he knew. Just like it's been said down at DE about Billy Graham and how his ministry never grew until he accepted the scriptures in full faith. And you can't be the best chiropractor that you can be until you accept our principles in your mind and take that dynamic essential into your heart. I learned that here. You'll learn that at DE if you haven't already. And you learn that bringing people together and bringing people into that room and dipping them into the principle is just as important as dipping yourself in there. I got re-dipped into that principle when I came to that place, and it's enabled me to serve so many more people and keep me on point and on focus. And that's really what I learned in DE. I learned it all there, that certainty. And if I could share anything with anyone else, that is what I would share, is just keep showing up. It took much longer for this stuff to seep into my mind. And, like I said, I've been showing up to DE for 15 years straight now, pretty much. And I've missed a few due to some other commitments. Unlike O'Halloran, who says he never has any hobbies, all he does is chiropractic. I've got a lot of hobbies and I'm addicted to and so I like to have my fun. But when it comes to the practice of chiropractic, it's so important to keep your mind and your body pure. And it's not just the principles, but it's the principles coupled with that dynamic essential that will make you successful. And that's really all I got. And Nate's telling me that that's what I needed to share. If anyone has any questions or anything they want to ask, I'm absolutely honored to be on this call, and I'm looking forward to sharing more stuff with you guys at DE. But I love and appreciate you, Brian. I appreciate you getting me on this call, and Dr. Brian Lieberman for asking me to do this call. It's an absolute honor.
Greg, man.
Yeah,
Dude,
I'm on.
That was awesome, brother. You did a great job.
Thanks, man. Someone told me just to speak from the heart, and my heart's been growing a lot like the Grinch. Every time if we took an x-ray, you would see it getting exponentially bigger every time I attend DE. And I just love it, man. And I'm just so honored to be, asked to do these things. And it's just great to share. And I'm just honored. Thank you so much for having me again.
Yeah, you really hit your stride there, and you could just feel your heart and passion coming out in this call, man. And it was really great to listen to, man. So thanks so much for sharing your story and for being a loyal servant of DE and serving the people when you're right. Trust me, we had some naysayers down here, the same thing that would come after us. Oh, you're spreading the virus, like we're serving our people. And dude, that was.
Well, Brian, I seem to have lost your audio, or all the audio. So I don't know what's going on here, but I can't hear nothing.
All right. Don't worry about it. We'll close up
are.
tonight. Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
I was
now I
just
can hear
saying
you.
how great you were. You can watch the replay and hear all my great comments about how wonderful you were.
I'm definitely going to do that.
I don't know
And,
what the hell
I just want to.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I want to share, it's like, I always miss these calls on Tuesday because I actually, do my own Tuesday live stream with my band. We do our music thing every Tuesday night. I've been doing that for a long time. But I have been starting to catch some of them and watching the reruns. So, if I'm not on these calls, it's not because I don't want to be, but I absolutely love and appreciate everyone. So it's just great to be here and honored to take the night off and spend it with you guys.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. And the great thing about these calls is if you're tied up, you can catch them back. They're all over the DE Facebook pages, and you can always tune in later. If I miss it, I'm always on it later just to hear it. So it's great technology. I'm so happy we've gone to this format. But anyway, man, great job today. Awesome. Thanks for being a servant up there, man, for so many and for 15 years at DE, man. That's awesome. We'll see you in August at DE. And thank you everybody for being on the broadcast. Next week, Dr. Matt Swees will be our speaker. So we'll see everybody next Tuesday night, 9 p.m. for the Tuesday night Principal Chiro broadcast from DE and Band of Brothers. Take care, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Love you.